Hello and welcome to 3 Ninja Level Excel Skills. My name's Jeff and I'm glad that you are here. I'm a Microsoft certified trainer and I love sharing the things I've learned about Excel over the years, especially those things that help us get our work done fast. And I am very excited for today's session because we get to talk about 3 Ninja Level Excel Skills. And I titled this webinar 3 Ninja Level Excel Skills, and I want to point out 2 keywords, all right, in that title. First is ninja. Literally translated, it means spy. Okay, and the primary mission is getting information, right? And other words, rich words that you think about when you think about the word ninja, you think of speed, you think of effective, skilled, stealth, training. And so these are all, wonderful words for for the webinar and the stuff that we're going to talk about. Okay, so ninja. Now, skills. Skills. I did not call this webinar Excel tips because a tip is different from a skill. A tip is something small and narrow and very easily mastered in, a few moments or a few minutes. And that is not what we're talking about. We're not talking about Excel tips. We're talking about Excel skills. Okay, and for a ninja, their skills are called ninjutsu, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some skills that are developed over time. And proficiency comes with practice and training. So these are not tips, these are skills. And the reason I called this skills is because the things that we're going to talk about today are deep. They are very big Excel features. And so, after the webinar, you should be able to apply some of these things pretty readily. However, there's plenty of more room to discover and uncover. Okay, there's lots of ground to explore these big, large features of Excel. Okay, so that's kind of our setup. So what are we going to do today? Like ninjas, today we are going to get information. And the way that we're going to do it is by using PowerQuery. All right, the second thing we're going to do, like ninjas, is be effective, and we're going to deliver effective reports. And we're going to use pivots for that, PivotTables, PivotCharts. And just like ninjas, we are going to work with great speed. Okay, and the way that we're going to do that in Excel is through VBA macros. Okay, so that's our agenda. That's the setup. I think we're ready to go. So let's talk about our first skill. Our first skill is PowerQuery. And if there was sort of one thing that if you're not sure about that you'd like to dig deeper into, I would suggest starting with PowerQuery. It is very useful. To me, it is a mission-critical Excel skill these days, and it is very capable at saving time and helping automate lots of things. So we're going to talk about PowerQuery. And just like ninjas, we're going to get information, and the way that we're going to do it is with PowerQuery. So let me demonstrate by opening up a workbook called Budget Summary. Okay, here we go. So what's the example or the illustration? Here's the basic idea. We want to prepare a budget summary. That means we need to get information. Okay, we need to bring in or import or retrieve budget data from all of our company's departments. And so what I did is I emailed out some templates, or I made some budget templates available on the network and asked all the budget managers to fill out their budget table. And, please don't mess up my workbook, okay? And then send it back or save it or whatever. So now I have all these different departmental workbooks with the budget, and I want to bring them all in. I want to consolidate them. So let's take a look actually at the folder. Here's the folder, and it's called Data, and it contains, the accounting department's workbook. Looks like a couple of PDF files were printed there. We got corporate's workbook, HR, manufacturing, marketing, warehouse. Let's take a look at the accounting workbook just to kind of get our bearings. We double click on that, and the accounting manager sends this to us, and I'm like, you just inserted a bunch of columns. I just asked you not to change the structure of the workbook. But, on the upside, at least it looks like you entered the budget values into this budget table. And this is a table, it's called budget, and I created that for them. And it looks like they got the numbers there, but, they changed the structure. They inserted a bunch of columns. They also inserted a new worksheet called mobile with a bunch of random calculations. Is that going to be a problem? I don't know. We'll find out. Let's go ahead and close that, and let's take a look at the next folder. The next file is from corporate. Let's see what the corporate manager did. We open this up, and what? They inserted a bunch of columns over here. And so our budget table is over in column A instead of over starting in to the right. And there's a bunch of sheets that have been inserted too. Is that going to be a problem? I don't know. It looks like at least they got the budget values into the budget table. So that's good. And let's close this and let's look at one more. And let's look at HR. We look at HR and here we see, okay, yes, there we got it. So the HR manager got the budget values into the budget table and didn't change the structure of the workbook. So like, way to go. That was awesome. But now we get all this stuff back and we're like, how am I going to go get all that information and consolidate it and bring it to a summary worksheet? Well, for the last 5, 10, 20, 30 years that we've been using Excel, what does this manual process sound like or look like? It kind of looks like this. I need to open each of them, copy, paste it in here, and then, close, go to the next one, copy, paste it in here. It's a lot of copy paste. Okay. And then what happens next week when they update their values? Remember, this budget season runs the course of a couple of months and there's many iterations. So they're going to make some changes. And now I have to somehow, copy paste? And do I have to go to each of them or do I have to know which person made changes? That's how we used to have to do it. We don't have to do it like that anymore. Now we have PowerQuery. So what is PowerQuery? PowerQuery is a tool that's designed to get and transform. That means retrieve, and transform, clean it up. All right, so as a kind of a quick tour here, we can get data from files, from databases, from Azure, from online sources, from a bunch of other sources. Okay, and so where we're going to get our data right now is from that folder. So we're going to go to get data from file, from folder. And rather than browse, I'm just going to come back here and I'm going to copy this path and I'm going to paste it in here just to save us some time. I click OK. And now PowerQuery is going to open this up and it's going to say, listen, Jeff, here's a list of all of the files in that folder and subfolders. And so now we have a couple choices. We could combine and load, and that means combine all the results from all of these files, but that's not really what we want because we don't want the PDFs. Okay, we could load, which means just give me this list back to Excel, and that's not really what we want. We don't want the list of files. We sort of want each of the contents from each of the Excel files. So instead what we're going to do is click Transform, and that is going to open up the PowerQuery editor. All right, so from within this PowerQuery editor, we see that we have a bunch of columns, and I'm actually just going to close Query Settings for now to give us a little bit more room. And now what we want to do is we want to remove the files that we want to exclude. And we don't want anything from any of the PDFs. So the way that we kind of manage rows is by using a filter. So I'm going to click on Extension, I'm going to remove PDF and click OK. And now this is telling me that the workbooks or the files that we're going to work with are the Excel workbooks. And we could apply other filters based on name, dates, or whatever kind of project you're working on. But for us, we want just the Excel workbooks. So we filter that to control the rows. All right, and now what we want to do is bring in the contents of these workbooks. So we don't want to close and load. That would send this list back to Excel. That's not what we want. What we really want to do is sort of somehow combine all the budget tables. To do that, we click on this Combine Files button. We click on that. Excel does its thing, and it gives us a prompt, and it says, Jeff, I've looked at the first file, and I see a bunch of different objects or a bunch of different things. Like, which one do you want me to pull in from each of the files? Well, I don't want the worksheets. I really want this budget table. And this is beautiful because what it's going to do is it's going to lock onto that budget table wherever it is. Even if a manager changed the worksheet name, even if the manager inserted new worksheets, even if the manager inserted new columns and now the table's over to the right or down or to the left, wherever that budget table is, this is going to find it and retrieve it. And that's what we want here. We want to get all of the values from all of the budget tables regardless of where they are. So we click budget and then we click OK. Excel does its thing. It goes through all the files and lo and behold, bam, now we have it. And I'm going to close this down a little bit. And so now let's take a look. Wow, I think it actually worked. Look at this. Accounting, here's all my rows from that table. Here's the corporate department, here's all of those rows. I think this actually worked. Yeah, it totally worked. Totally worked. And now at this point, what I could do is I could close and load this back to Excel, but it's not clean. So we did the get or the retrieval. Now we need to do the transform or the cleaning. So what are some things we need to clean up here? Well, first of all, we don't want this total row because we're going to put this into a report and summarize it on our own. So I want to eliminate this total row. So just like before, we're going to do that with a filter. I extend this, I scroll down, I remove total, click OK, and now that's fine. And I can continue to apply any other filters depending on what you're working on. You can control rows that way. And let's take a look at this. Total column, do we need that? No, because we're going to build a report that summarizes all these quarter columns. So we've controlled rows through filters. We can also control columns, and we can do that in a couple different ways here. We can manage columns, we can remove, choose columns. By the way, we can also reduce rows by removing top or bottom or duplicate. So lots of fun choices depending on what you're working on. You're going to want to check those out. Here we just want to remove this column. So now we've removed the total column. And we're looking pretty good, except for there's two other things we need to do. First of all, I want to change this to just the department name. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to remove the XLSX. So how do we do that? Well, we select the column name and we go to transform, text column, and there's lots of fun choices. So depending on what you're working on, you may want to split the column, apply some formats. Here we want to extract it. And depending on what you're working on, there's lots of fun choices. Here we want all of the text before the period or the dot. So I select text before delimiter. And now all I need to do is define that delimiter. What's the character that needs to retrieve the values from? So I'm going to click a dot, and then I click OK. And now this is cleaned up. So now I have the department name. I can also rename columns. I'm just going to double click that, and I'm going to call this department. Fine. And now let's take a look at this. Here we have 4 columns of numbers. But when we're working in Excel, a lot of the advanced features, including things like pivot tables, work best with a single amount column. So I need to somehow combine these, but I still want to see the quarter level details. So it would be nice if I could somehow take this 5021 salary and actually create a Q1 row and then insert another Q2 row, Q3, Q4. So that at the end of the day, we'd have 2 columns, the quarter label and the amount in a single column. That kind of transformation is called an unpivot. So what we can do is we can select our numeric columns that we want to unpivot. We go to transform and we just unpivot columns and we click OK. Now we got it. Too good, too good. All right, and so now I can go to attribute and I want to call this quarter. And I have value, I'm going to call this amount, click OK, and we got it. And now I think we're looking pretty good. So what we want to do at this point is close and load to, and we want to close and load to a table. This means we want to see the consolidated results in a table, in a worksheet. I don't have to do that, I have lots of other choices, but for now I want to see that. Where do I want to put that table? Existing or new? I'll put it in existing worksheet. And then we also have an option to add this data to the data model. What's that? That means we're going to ultimately prepare some kind of a report, maybe a pivot table, maybe a pivot chart. Maybe we have one table, maybe we have multiple tables, maybe we write some measures. So these are, some additional things we're going to discover here. But for now, let's make a mental note that I want to send this to the data model because the data model can be a source for our reports. And we're going to do that next. So for now, I have the table, existing worksheet, add it to the data model, I click OK. Excel does its thing, and it brings back the results, and now we've got it. Okay, now we've got it. And now that the data is here, we need to summarize it and create a report. Okay, so the question is, well, like what kind of report? There's all kinds of report options and formats. What kind of report? Well, we need to have a brief discussion about that first, and then we're going to come right back. But before we go have that discussion, I want to point out one thing. I'm going to close Queries and Connections. I can right-click and click Refresh. And when I do, whatever Excel workbooks are in that folder will flow in. Any new PDFs will be excluded. Any workbooks that are out will be removed. Any workbooks that are added will be included. So I can just right-click and refresh, and Excel will do all of those transformations again for us. So this is absolutely brilliant for our recurring use workbooks. And it's especially nice here because we have many versions of the budget. You know, people are making changes, right? In the old days, as people would make changes, we'd have to go and open that file, copy, paste. But now, all we do is right-click and refresh. And so now if the marketing manager has made changes, they'll come in. If the accounting department manager has made changes, they're going to come in. They're going to come in with a right-click and refresh. You got to love it. All right. So that's so far so good. Let's go ahead and go to the next thing. Okay, the next thing is a quick resource here. So if you've not used that from folder in PowerQuery to retrieve values from many files, let me take you to an article that you can work through at your own pace, and it's got some examples and things like that. So what you do is just head to the Excel University website, click Articles, and this is going to be a list of all the kinds of formal published articles I've done. Feel free to check out any that look interesting. The one I'm after right now is here called Mind Blown. Click on that. It's going to take you through a narrative step by step of how to retrieve multiple files using PowerQuery. So feel free to check that out if that will be helpful. Now let's talk about effective reports. We want to build effective reports. So the first question we have to ask ourselves is, well, what type of report? Well, what do you mean, what type of report? Well, we could display a report, a summary with a table format. That's where we have row labels, numbers in columns, and that's a table. But we can also deliver our information or our report as a graph. And then the question is, well, if we decide to go with graph, like what kind? Are we using bars, boxes, like lines, like what? And then once we prepare the table or the graph, we want to apply some design practices to have effective communication. So for this webinar, if we determine that the best, most effective report type is a table, we're going to build a pivot table. And if we decide it's a graph, we're going to go with a pivot chart. So hold on, Jeff, back up. What are you talking about, like table versus graph? How do I know which one? And so I take my cues or my guidance from legend Stephen Few. And so if you're interested in checking out some of his works, head to Amazon. And I suggest starting with Show Me the Numbers. And it's going to help, document how do we determine if a table is a better fit or a graph? And if it's a graph, what kind? So Stephen Few, Show Me the Numbers. Now, let's just briefly talk about kind of a high-level idea here. Tables. Tables are a great format when we're trying to deliver precise values. Tables are a great format when we're trying to provide lookup values. In other words, I want to scan down a list, find a department, and look to the right and see the value. Like I'm trying to look up numbers, that the table is going to be great for that. Or if I'm trying to deliver multiple units of measure. Here you can see we have expenses, those are dollars, percent of total, budget, an unfavorable or favorable variance, and a variance percentage. And so for this, this is going to be a table. So a table is going to be a good fit when we're trying to deliver precision, lookup values, or multiple units of measure. And there are other criteria, but that's kind of an idea. What if we decide to go with graph? When would we decide to go with graph? Well, we would decide to go with graph if the message really lies in the overall shape, pattern, or trend, not the precise values. And okay, if we decide to go with a graph, like what kind? Excel has dozens of different kinds of charts. Well, the kind of graph depends on the relationship that we're trying to feature. And there are more than this, but just to kind of give you an idea of what we're talking about, a nominal relationship means that the order doesn't matter. Okay, and a ranking relationship means order does matter. And part to whole means, hey, what is each individual component's contribution to the overall whole? And time series means trends over time. And so depending on the relationship, that's going to determine what kind of chart, if we're going to plot this with bars, boxes, lines, or points. So that is kind of a really like 30,000 foot view summary. So let's apply some of this stuff to our current project on hand here. We're trying to deliver a budget summary. A budget summary. So what are our report objectives? Well, actually we have 3 different objectives. The first objective is we want to enable precise lookup by department. What does that sound like? Well, that sounds like a table, and that's right. So we're going to go with a pivot table. The second objective we have is we want to display the budget by department ranked. That sounds like a chart. Okay, and so we're going to go with a pivot chart. And then the third objective is we want to visualize this trend over time. What's the total department budgets doing by quarter? Trends over time. So to do that, we're going to go with a line chart, and we're going to go with a pivot chart. Okay, so now that we kind of have that background in determining table or graph, if graph, what kind, let's go back to our budget summary. Here's our budget summary. So I've laid out report A, B, C, each of these for our objectives. First of all, report A. Remember what that was? Our objective is to enable the lookup of precise values by department. That is a table. We're going to go with a pivot table. So what we do is we go to Insert, Pivot Table. And for the last 5, 10, 30 years that we've been using pivot tables, we've been able to define as our source a single table or range that exists in a worksheet. And we can still do that. But we sent the data to the data model. Do you remember that? And now we can use the data model as the source for our reports. And in this simple example, we have a single table, but just to let you know, data models support multiple tables where we can define relationships. It also supports complex measures with a rich function language that we can use to write really complicated formulas that we use in our pivot table reports. So for now, we're going to use this workbook's data model as the source. We're going to place it on an existing worksheet. We're going to click OK. And now we have our basic pivot table layout. So do you remember what we wanted to see? We wanted to see departments. So I'm going to insert department. I check the checkbox. We want to see the amount. So I insert amount. And let me go ahead and apply a number format here. Number, no decimal, comma. And then we wanted to see quarters. So I'm going to insert quarters into columns, click and drag and release, and now we've got it. And now our objective has been met. We've delivered the precise, exact budget values, and it's easy to do a lookup. They're organized alphabetically, so I can scan down the list, find the department I'm looking after, and then shoot to the right to view the related values. Okay? And then cosmetics. So after we build a report, we're going to use some cosmetics. And again, I take my cues from Stephen Few. So Show Me the Numbers is a marvelous resource. But as a kind of an idea here, we want to kind of remove the clutter and the excess color and this stuff. So for now, just to keep it simple, we're going to go with design, pivot table styles, and we're going to go with this one here. And that's not perfect, but it's certainly better. And we can also right align our column labels here. There we go. Our numbers are right aligned, column labels right aligned. So that looks pretty good. But that's the idea here. So we've created a table. This is a pivot table report. Let's go to report B. Here, to review our objective, we want to view the overall budget by department ranked. Ranked means in order. Biggest to smallest, smallest to biggest. So we're going to go with a chart. Insert, pivot chart. We want to use this workbook's data model. Click OK. And now let's place this here, and I'm just going to kind of place this right here. And now let's insert the fields into the chart. We want to see it by department. So by department, and we want to see amount. Okay, and this is a nominal. Order doesn't matter, but order matters here. This is a ranking relationship, so we need to sort this. So I'm just going to click on this department dropdown. I'm going to select more sort options, and I'm going to say descending by amount and click OK. And now we got it. Okay. And our basic chart is set up, and now we need to apply those cosmetics, right? And so there's, lots of design standards that Steve sets up in his book. For now, we'll just keep it simple, and I'm just going to remove some of the excess chart junk. That's all the ink that doesn't relate to the data. I'm going to hide all field buttons. I'm going to remove grids, lines, and legends. I could give this a different title if I wanted. I'll call this budget by department, and off we go. So that's a basic idea. Okay. Now let's go to our third objective. Our third objective was to view the total budget over time. So again, we're going to go with a graph. Insert, pivot chart. Use this workbook's data model, click OK. Let me just go ahead and get this into position. There we go. And let's close this down. And once again, I'm going to insert amount and quarter. Okay, and now we have this column chart, but when we're going to do trends over time, we're going to change this to a line chart. So how do I change the chart type? I'm just going to select the chart. I go to Design, change chart type. I'm going to pick Line and click OK. This looks pretty good. All right, and now we're going to apply some cosmetics. So again, I'm going to hide all field buttons. I'm going to remove grid, lines, and legend. I could give this a different name. I could call this budget by quarter, and that's okay. And let's kind of clean this up too. So I'm going to double click on this. I'm going to go with number, and I'm going to go with no decimals. Hit enter. That looks fine. Let's close that. And actually, let's go back to here and let's double click this one and number, and I'm going to go to a number. No decimals, hit enter. Okay, that looks pretty good. So now we have our 3 reports built, pivot table to pivot charts, and now we actually want to deliver these, right? And here's the key thing about delivering these reports. We're going to deliver them as a PDF. We're going to save them to a network folder somewhere, but we're going to do this over and over again, updating them as the department managers update their budget. So this is going to be repetitive. So when we think of repetitive tasks, we want to think about, could we automate this with VBA or macro? So let's go have a little quick powwow about that, and then we'll come right back here. So let's go over here, and first here's a resource. So pivot table from many CSV files. So to get to this, I'm going to go to the Excel University blog. And in addition to writing these sort of formal published articles, I also write informal articles. They're called blog posts. Click on blog to view them. If you'd like to be emailed every time I write a new Excel article, you can feel free to subscribe here. And I usually write a new Excel article about once a week. So you can do a search, you can browse, you can also click on a topic you want to learn more about. Here I want to learn more about pivot tables, so I click on that. This is going to filter all the posts for pivot tables. The one I'm after is an older post, and it is called Pivot Table from Many CSV Files. This is going to be a narrative you can work through at your own speed, and it is going to show how to use PowerQuery to retrieve lots of CSV files and then build a pivot table from that data. Okay, so if you'd like to check that out, feel free to check that out as well. Now, let's go back over here. Boom. Let's talk about VBA for a moment. Okay, VBA is where we're going to get some tremendous speed. Okay, and VBA is a language, Visual Basic for Applications. It's a programming language that's built right into Excel. And it's going to be great for speeding our repetitive tasks. So think about a workbook that you update every day, week, month, quarter, year, and you may have a worksheet that has a list of instructions for you. It might sound like step 1, go to the accounting system and do an export. Step 2, open up the export file and do a copy and paste it into the data sheet. Step 3, clean up all the extra rows. Step 4, clean up all the extra columns. Step 5, so you might have a list of instructions written in English for you, okay? What we can do is write a list of instructions in VBA for Excel, okay? And that means instead of us going through that list of updates, Excel does that for us through VBA. And I will tell you, it can do it a lot faster than we humans can, that's for sure. So that's the idea of VBA. It's a programming language built into Excel that allows us to write a series of instructions that can be executed by Excel very quickly. Okay, so let's see how it works. Let's go back to budget summary, and let's talk about our updates for a moment. So first, let's kind of get a practice of doing the update. When we're looking at report B, we look at this and we're like, you know what? That sales guy never gave me the budget. I don't have the sales budget in here. And so we have to go call him or email him and say, hey, the budgets were due like on Friday. Where are the budgets? Oh, sorry, I've been busy. Let me get those to you now. All right, fine. So the budget gets sent over, and now here's the sales department budget. If I needed to incorporate the sales budget into my reports 5, 10, or 20 years ago, what does that look like? It looks like a lot of manual steps. Remember? We'd have to open up that workbook, go to the budget table, copy it, paste it. Then we'd have to do all those transformations. Remove the total row. Okay, we'd have to somehow unpivot it and convert those 4 quarterly columns into a single column. And then we'd have to paste it and append it into our data range. And then we'd have to go and fill that range down so all the reports reference those new values. How do we do it now? Now it's easy. Now we just copy the sales budget, paste it into the data folder, and now we just go to Data, Refresh All. And when we do that, PowerQuery engages, and it's already done. But it goes to that folder, it filters out all the PDFs, it brings in all the budget tables, it does the transformations, it updates the name, it does the unpivot, it removes the rows, removes the excess columns, and updates all the reports, and it's done. Okay, that's what we did with PowerQuery and pivot tables. We haven't even talked about VBA yet. Okay, but that's the idea of doing the refresh. So every time some budget numbers change or some workbooks want to come in or out of that folder, we just click refresh all and it's done. So that's one thing we have to do every budget iteration, every time there are changes. The second thing we have to do is we have to actually print these to PDF. So what does that look like? It looks like this. Select report A, hold down Shift, select report C. Then we go to File, then we go to Print, then we go to Print to PDF. Okay, then we click Print. And then we select the destination as Reports, and we're going to call this like Budget Summary, version 1, and click Save. Okay, it's done, and then we kind of unselect all these and go back here. And actually, let's see if it worked. Let's go to Reports, Budget Summary version 1. It actually opened up over here, so let me just drag it over here. And now we have our reports. Okay, and we have our reports, and we look good. So that's what the update sequence looks like. It looks like refresh and then printing these reports. Now, we could do that ourselves with a series of steps, but we could have Excel do it too. And just like PowerQuery is very big and the data model is a big feature, VBA is a very big feature. So, in our short webinar time, we're just going to scratch the surface, but just to kind of give you a flavor, here's what it looks like. We go to View, Macros. And what we're going to do is we're just actually going to use the recorder. And when we hit the recorder, Excel is actually going to watch all of our keyboard and mouse commands. It's going to translate into that VBA language, and then we can replay that later. So we're going to give our macro a name. It's going to be called Update Budget, and we're going to click OK. And right now, Excel is watching everything we do. So the first step was to do the refresh. So we go to Data, Refresh All. We kind of let that do its thing. And it's done. And then we select Report A, hold down Shift, Report C. We go to File, we go to Print, we print to PDF, we click Print, we give this a name. We're going to call this one Budget Summary Version 2. We hit Save. And now the macro is done. Actually, let's click on Deliver. Okay, and now the macro is still actually recording us, but we're done. So that we need to stop the recorder. So how do we do that? Well, we could just go to View, Macros, Stop Recording. And there's also a tool button down there, but we're going to go Stop Recording. And now it's done. And now let's actually set up a button to make it easy to run that macro in the future. So to do that, we're going to go to the Developer tab. And if you're working along, you might be like, hey, Jeff, I don't have a Developer tab. How'd you get that? It's easy. To get the Developer tab, just go to File, Options, Customize Ribbon, and check this Developer checkbox, and that'll turn on or off your Developer tab. We click OK. And the Developer tab has all the kinds of things we want to have access to when we're working with macros. For example, we could even open up the Visual Basic Editor by clicking that. And here's modules. I'm going to double click that. And there's the code, the VBA code that was written when we were doing our update. And so active workbook refresh all. Okay, that's the code for clicking that refresh button. And then sheets, report A, report B, print, and then select the deliver sheet. So this is the VBA code. And if we really want to dig in deep, we can. There's a lot here to learn. But for this short webinar, we're just going to use the recorder and kind of keep moving. But that's the Visual Basic Editor. So I'm going to close this down. And now I want to create a button so that when someone clicks that button, it runs the update steps. So I'm going to click on Insert, and I'm going to go with Form Control Button, and I just place it wherever I want. Excel says, Jeff, when someone clicks that button, what macro do you want to run? I'm going to say Run the Update button, Update Budget macro, and click OK. And here's the button. We can move this around. We can change the text here. I'm going to call this Update Budget Summary. All right. Or Update Budget Reports. That's better. And click out of it. Okay. So now what does the update look like? Right? Right now, sales is in here. But let's say the salesperson makes some changes. Or let's say we don't want to include the sales report. Let's just delete it. So these are the files that are in that folder now. So now to do the update, we just click Update Budget Reports. The refresh happens. And now it's going to ask us, what do we want to call this report? I'm going to call it Budget Summary version 3. Click Save, and then it's done. Wait, is it done? Yeah, it's done. It's done. That's how we're going to work with great speed. Well, let's check it out. Let's go back over here. Let's go into Reports. There's version 3. Oops, it opened over here again. Let me go ahead and move this back over here and expand it. Sales is gone from there. Sales is gone from there. And there's our reports. Okay, and as each budget manager makes changes, we click this button. The refresh is done. The budget reports are done. And that's how we're going to work with great speed. Okay, too fun. I love this stuff. I hope you're having a great time too, because these features that are available to us in Excel really help us to work fast and get our work done faster. And I absolutely love that. So anyway, that's the stuff I wanted to talk about on the webinar. Thank you so much for joining me. For all those resources, check out the exceluniversity.com website. There's tons of blog posts, articles, online courses, all kinds of good stuff. So anyway, feel free to check that out if it would be helpful. Again, thanks so much for joining me. Have a great day.
This video is a production of Excel University.